Good afternoon, everyone. I am Lisa Morgan, your president of the Georgia Association of Educators. We'd like to welcome everyone who has joined us this evening for our Rights at Night session about the teacher retirement system. And we have with us this evening our very special guest, Dr. L.C. Buster Evans, who is the executive director of the Teacher Retirement System of Georgia. He has been executive director of TRS since 2016, and he has worked with us throughout that time. I know he has been at our retired meetings, and he's also, look for him every time you get your No magazine, because we will have information from him there. And he is graciously joining us tonight to give us an update about the teacher retirement system and what we're looking at as we move forward into a new legislative session. So Dr. Evans, I will turn it over to you. And I'm sorry, I forgot to say, if you have a question that you would like to ask, please put it in the chat. So we'll know who has the questions and we can find you. And also, so we won't have the same question asked more than once. So if you have a question, send it to me in the chat. Thank you.
Lisa, thank you so very much. It is a pleasure to be with you. I want to congratulate you on your presidency of GAE, a great organization representing educators across the state of Georgia. And to serve as president of a statewide organization is a great honor, and I know that you recognize that. But thank you also for making this a medium of communication so that you can communicate to your members and that we can communicate as part of our agency to you. Thanks, Joe Fleming. Joe is representing you extremely well in Atlanta at the state capitol as issues come up involving education. And during the time that I've got to know Joe, I can tell you he's represented your agency quite well. I also need to mention, I know that some of you may have heard us chatting just a few minutes ago. Debbie Simons, a past state president of GAE, who serves as our chair of our board of trustees, is online tonight. But not only does Debbie serve as chair of our board of trustees, Debbie's serving as the president of the National Council of Teacher Retirement. So she's got her ears to the ground, not only in Georgia as it relates to this important policy issue of teacher retirement, but also at the national level. So you never can tell where, Lisa, if you're serving as state president of GAE, where it may take you down the road. You might be the national president of some other organization too, but we're glad to be with you tonight. Now, I'll have to go ahead and tell you, this is one of my favorite parts of my job. I love to talk to our members all across the state, and I can see several names up here. Some of you are hiding your face tonight, and I understand that. You didn't want to put your makeup on, but the reality of it is I can see a few faces, but I see a number of names, some of these names that I recognize, and so it's good to be with you. It's good to be with you for multiple reasons. We love having communication with our members. We personally believe that our retirement system is of great value as an education policy issue. And we like to hear from you, but we also like to share with you what's going on and establish that communication. Another reason, and I know that we've got some retired people. Dan, I see people like you and some others on this list here who, and I think I saw Tony in there a while ago too, people who are retired. And some of these people, some of you will get there sooner or later, but I love to tell people some of the happiest people I know are retired educators. And there are reasons for that. And so it's good. We love to be able to talk about our system and what it's doing for you who are retired, but also to give hope for those people who one day will join the group of the happiest people I know, and those are retired educators. So let's talk a little bit about teachers' retirement system, give you some numbers. And this is largely speaking going to be a night of good news. Now, there's sometimes we come to you with concerns and things that are crazy. And while we're living in crazy times with COVID-19, that's probably the dark cloud of 2020 that overshadows all of us. Despite this dark cloud, when it comes to the retirement system, we're faring quite well. And I want you to be encouraged about that. On the other hand, I know as a former educator, although will always consider myself an educator, these have got to be some of the most challenging times as you try to do what you've been doing all these years in providing educational services to boys and girls all across this state, and trying to do what you've always done, but doing it in a different method and in a different manner. So I know these are challenging. So as you do that, I just want you to know that our hearts go out to you. We think about you daily, and we think about how we can continue to be able to serve you. Some good news. So TRS by the numbers. Remember a few of these numbers. First and foremost, we have over 400,000 active and retired members of the teachers retirement system across the state of Georgia. 400,000. That is a large number of people. That is a large number of people who have an interest in the health of TRS, or a large number of people who have an interest in the design of the plan of the teachers retirement system. But we do have over 400,000. Now, of that, there are about 138,000 who are currently retired or beneficiaries. These people get a benefit every month on the first of the month. We have over about 240,000 who are active contributing. And I like to say this, and this is some degree of truth to it, but we are not like some retirement plans. Some retirement plans have as many or more people who are retired as they do active contributing. When you see in any retirement system a good positive gap between more people working, paying into the system, than those who are receiving a benefit, that is the sign that you don't have, quote, cash flow issues in your plan. But all that being said, we do have over 400,000 by the time that you add our retirees, our active contributing, and then a group of people who are active, but maybe they're not contributing, people who may be staying out, doing something else for a period of time. At some point in time, they will come back and be an active contributing member, and we always have a number of those. Just another couple of things that you may be of interested in. Our average benefit pay to our retirees is about $3,500 a month, but our average new retirees benefit is about $2,550. So what is the difference between the $2,550, which is the average new retirees benefit, and the average paid to our beneficiary? It's called the cost of living adjustment. That over the years, as you know, you will every 6 months when you're COLA eligible, you will receive a benefit, and that is again something that we have that's a very valuable benefit as a component of our retirement plan. Now, you're going to hear something tonight that no group has ever heard. You're going to be the first. And for you dialing in tonight, as of this morning, our plan had eclipsed the $90 billion mark. We are one of the top roughly 25 pension systems in the country as it's measured by assets that are being managed. Of that over $90 billion, let me tell you where that's come from. I started about 4 years and 3 months ago as your executive director. I really appreciate that opportunity, and thank you all for that. But when I started, we had $65 billion. Today, we have over $90 billion. So the health of the plan over the last 4 years has been really good. That is significant, because we always need to be growing in our asset base. But when we've got really 4 consecutive years of good growth, that helps to lend to that argument that our plan can be sustainable for each of you when you retire. But even more important than that, that new teacher who comes into the profession, who is part of the reason why we have a retirement plan. So my first group of points that I've shared with you are some numbers that are important to the teacher's retirement system. But I want to go to the second point that I want to share. And Joe and I talked about this, and I think it's important to understand, and we answer the question, why? Now, I know all of you can remember growing up, and if you had kids like I did when they were teenagers and you told them something and they would ask you that irritating question, why? And you wanted to say, because I told you so. And, you know, over the years, what we've learned is that that's probably not a great answer. There's a legitimate reason. People deserve an opportunity to be able to answer the question or have an answer to the question, why? So our question that I want to address that you walk away with tonight is to be able to answer the question, why do we have a defined benefit retirement plan? Now, the wrong answer is that for an educator can be rich and live happily ever after. Now, that's a good result, and that's wonderful for our educators that do, but when you talk about sustainability and when you talk about from an education policy perspective, I think you got to recognize that there are really three reasons why we have one. First and foremost is so that we can recruit people into a very noble profession. You know, there's a lot of jobs out there and there are a lot of things that people can choose to do. And I think that teaching is one of those more important things. But, you know, the research over and over says that there are a lot of even people who are teachers who would discourage their own children from coming into the profession. Now, I don't know if you fit into that category, but I tend to think that there are people who enter the profession, and I will tell you, even in my own case, one of the reasons that I entered into the profession is that I knew that if I worked for 30 years, that I would be able to retire and have a retirement. I knew that I probably would not make as much money as I would make in the private sector, or even some components of other government sectors. But the reason why we have one is that it is important for recruitment. And that's important for a lot of categories, but we can never lose sight of the fact that one of the main reasons is it's a recruitment tool. Now, second reason why we have a defined benefit plan is retention. And I like to use this analogy and ask a question. So it's going to be rhetorical. And I just like for you to think, especially if you're a classroom teacher, particularly and maybe you got 10 or 15 or 20 years in, but do you ever remember when you were in that school year and you were thinking, God, I do not know if I'm going to be able to make it another year? You know, they changed the CRCT or the ITBS and then to Georgia milestones, and you think, how can I do it? And then, or maybe you got the worst principal that you've ever had in the world or something like that. I just don't know that I can live through him or her. And, but the case might have been, but you happen to think about the fact, you know, I got 20 years in. If I can hang around just a few more years, I can retire and draw benefit for the rest of my life. Now, you can't maybe raise your hands, at least rhetorically, but whenever I'm asking that question, there'll be some people who will raise a hand. And for those who don't raise their hand, I said, you're either lying or you got a short memory. But the reality of it is, I think probably all of us maybe get frustrated somewhere along the way, but we realize that we're in this for multiple reasons. We're in this because of kids. There's a reason we chose the profession. We like teaching people. We are people, but we're also in this to finish to the end so that we finish well and that we can draw retirement. So we've got recruitment. That's one of the reasons why we have a defined benefit plan. The second reason is, from a policy perspective, is we keep people in the profession. And maybe you know this, maybe you don't know this, but the research that I used to look at along the way that talked about when teachers were most effective usually was somewhere between year 20 and 23. So if we can recruit people, recruit our brightest and best in the profession, keep them into somewhere between that year 20 and 25, we've actually got them during some of their most productive years of teaching. Those are the teachers who's lived through those administrators from who didn't need to be administrators. And they've lived through multiple tests. And as my wife even likes to remind me from time to time, that she knew what to do when whole language reading came along, because she knew that she couldn't buy into it lock, stock, and barrel. She needed to continue to do what she did along the way to help kids learn, because she had been there and had seen multiple cycles along the way. So the third R, though, is what Governor Ellis Arnold said when he created the teachers' retirement system in 1943. He said, I want our educators to be able to live out their retirement years with dignity. And you know what, folks? That's what our plan continues to do. For our 138,000 members, these people are able to not live wealthy. Well, it's $2,500, $3,000 a month, something like that. But they can afford their housing. They can afford their food. They can afford their medication. And you know what? If they can afford that nice trip or two somewhere out of state, or maybe even out of the country from time to time, I think that classifies as living out our retirement years in dignity. So I say all that to say, when people ask you and when you communicate with others about why we have a retirement plan, it is for those three reasons. But with that in mind, let me go to my third set of points to kind of talk about is talk about the future of retirement systems and the future of our retirement system. And I want to be upfront right from the very, very beginning. I do not know of any concerted effort with any great traction that wants to make radical changes to our plan. Now, I say that, but I also have to be honest with you. There are individuals, there are people who serve in policy-making positions in our state who they would like to see. They see that there's a lot of money that has to come into the TRS system. They also see the fact that we're sitting on $90 billion. And let me say this too. I have also never seen, after 8 years of serving as a trustee, and now over 4 years of serving as your executive director, I have never experienced any, quote, raid on the money. There's been no evidence. I think your money is safe, as is protected by law. There are sometimes people who believe in conspiracy theories who think that others would probably like to be able to get a hold of that money. And you know what, they probably are, to be honest, because where there's money, there's also always people who would like to get their hands on it. But I personally have never seen that. So I want to dispel any of the myths that you know, that money's sitting there and somebody's going to get it for operating purposes. I just don't believe that's going to happen, not without there being a significant uproar. And the second thing, like I said, even though we're likely to see, even as we embark upon a new legislative session coming up, it is possible that we may see some legislation introduced that would make changes to the plan. I do not know of an overwhelming concerted effort that has the support on a widespread basis. But again, that is where your organization and other educational organizations across this state come into play to represent you. Because when that conversation comes up, it is people like Lisa Morgan and Joe Fleming and Debbie Simons, as well as other organizations across our state who represent you, and they communicate to policymakers the things that I just talked about, why it is important to keep a defined benefit plan across the state. But I say that to say we have been a state, Georgia is a state that has not gone through radical pension reform. However, you don't have to go far. You can go across the state lines in either direction, in South Carolina, Alabama, or you can go north to places like Ohio and Chicago and Illinois and other places in Missouri who've gone through some fairly radical pension reform issues over the years. And they did so with the belief that they needed to do this to make the plans more sustainable. They did this because they believed that some people believed that it was too costly for government to be involved. And there are some people who just believe that maybe it's not the best type of plan in the future, but for multiple reasons. But I say all that to say, it is important that when we have these conversations, with people who want to question about why we have our plan and what the future is, that we very professionally are able to talk about why the plan is important. So that brings me to my fourth area of talks, 2 points, and to say, what can you do? You know, as someone who your job is, if you're an administrator, to administer a school, to administer a district, if you're a classroom teacher, or if you have some other function, you know, you shouldn't be worried about your retirement plan. That should be our job. That should be those people who represent you. But I will say this, it is important from time to time for our elected officials to hear from us. And again, when they ask the question, we need to be able to answer the question, why? So I have 3 things that I would share with you that I think are the reason, things that you can do if you believe that this retirement system is important in keeping you in the profession, but also important for ensuring that we have other people who continue to come into the profession. First thing that I tell you to do is you need to be able to communicate to your legislative delegation how important TRS is to the profession. And once again, tell them thank you. I mean, all of us love to be told thank you for a job well done. Nobody wants to be hit with the first thing when somebody to call us up and criticize us or accuse us. We want to be thanked. So let's put a little bit of sugar on this thing and let's tell people thank you for supporting public education. Thank you for supporting our retirement plan, because we believe it makes a difference. So that's the second thing. We believe it makes a difference because it helps to recruit people into the profession, help to retain the profession. But there's something that I've not talked about yet that's only like, I guess on the fringes, and that is each year our plan pays out in benefits of a little over $5 billion. Now that's $5 billion that goes into all 159 counties. Most of it stays in Georgia. I think the total number is about 80-something% of the money that stays in Georgia. That's money that goes into local communities all across this state. And I can't tell where everybody is on the screen, but you know, I've worked as an educator in places like Dodge County and Bleckley County and Forsyth County. And now I live in Monroe County and am coming to you from actually in another county in Georgia. But everywhere I go, and we keep up with this, we keep up with a list that shows how many active members that we have in counties, how many retired members that we have in counties, and then how much money goes into a county. And it's not uncommon for even smaller counties in Georgia for there to be $10 to $15 million that goes into that local community each year. That's money that goes to pay taxes. That's money that goes into the community that winds up to support mom and pop businesses, doctor's offices, ends up in the church offering plate, and in a number of things that goes back into the community to support the economic well-being of communities all across this state. So we call that the economic impact. So when you have that communication, you know, you've got to talk about what it means to the profession. You got to talk about why it's important. And then you also got to talk about it's the fact that it's an economic impact to communities all across this state. Now, I've been talking for, it looks like not quite, but maybe 20, 25 minutes by now. We want to have some time for questions. I already see some questions popping up, so that is great. But let me say this before I get to the question. First, I want to say thank you for the privilege it is to serve as your executive director. I thank you for the opportunities that we have to come into your home, to come into your meetings, to come to your conferences as you have. Again, that's one of the favorite things that we do. And I want you to always know that our commitment is here to serve you. And I do want to share with you 2 or 3 things real quick before closing down. We've done some things differently during this pandemic. And one of the things that we've done back in early March, when we realized that we were going to have to flip the workplace, we immediately began to realize that we needed to continue. We asked a question about what our core business functions were. One, we knew that our retirees needed to get a retirement check, right? Some of you can attest to that. Second thing that we also knew that was most important is that people that needed to be able to be counseled in retirement and make that retirement decision, and then us to process them. So we need to counsel them. As a part of that, we are doing things in a number of different ways than we've done in the past. Almost all of our retirement sessions now are being done either by phone or by video counseling. And but we're looking forward. We're looking forward to getting back face to face. And I know that some of our people are too, but as a part of that move, in conjunction or in partnership with the Bibb County Public Schools, we have opened an office in Macon, which is going to be a counseling center. One of the things I love to do while I'm in Atlanta and people come into the office, I'll walk through our visitation center and I like to meet them and I'll ask them where they came in from. Chances are I may know somebody that works in that county, and they would come in and they'd say, well, I've driven from Bainbridge. It took me 6 hours to get to North Atlanta. I've come from Camden County or Savannah or places. Yeah. And it's taken me because stay today and we'll spend the night. And so they're out of school for 2 days. And we got to thinking about that, and our board was phenomenally supportive, and we made the decision to open up an office in Macon. So we've already have counselors working out of there. They're working out of there remotely, but we actually think that will be a very, very busy hub of activity in the future once we open the doors back up. And we've done that so that we can be more accessible to you. So, Lisa, again, I want to say thank you to you. I know that I've seen some questions pop up on the screen. You may need to, maybe I can click this chat function, or either you can tell me what they are and I'll just do my best at answering them.
As I'm sitting here talking and muted, sorry. We have a couple of questions. The first question, Mr. Mortlander says he asks this every time. What is the future of the cost of living increase?
Okay. You know what? That is also one of those top questions that I get. And I'll always have to say, I'm going to give you the best answer based on the information that I have right now. I'll also tell you what I hope the answer for that question is, but I'll also talk to you frankly about what the realities are. Once again, that question has come up from time to time. For a number of years, our active members have paid 6% of their earnings into TRS as the employee contribution. That 6% contribution level has been established in that with the assumption that all of our beneficiaries, if they're COLA eligible, will get a 1.5% cost of living adjustment 2 times a year. So the formula has it built in. The assumption is that you will get there, and the law currently makes that provision that it will be there. We from time to time have seen legislation that would change that. My hope is, I think is that we hope that it will be there. We would make the argument, should the question come up, that this is one of the reasons why 6% is that amount that is being paid in there. I would tell you, although, as I promised to you that I would be frank with you, the cost of living adjustment, and I'm going to use that terminology, even though that's not the term that's used in the law, it is actually fairly costly in terms of when we overall talk the cost of the plan. That's one of the reasons why you and I need to always hope that our plan has the returns on the investments that we want it to have, which typically would be, 7.25% or better over the long period of time. So we hope that would be the case. So hopefully I've answered your question frankly enough. We hope it's going to be there. We've not seen any evidences that got major traction. that would reduce the COLA for existing retirees or even existing members. However, being frank with you, it could happen. It's just one of those things that I think that that policymakers know that it's important to you. I think they know that it's important to our retirees, and we'll continue to help them be aware of that. But again, on the other side of that, our job is to administer the plan that our policymakers put in place in Georgia law, and we will do that. And we will, as best we can, continue to advocate for what's technically referred to as the post-retirement benefit adjustment, or what you like to call is the COLA.
Dr. Evans and Mort, you guys are probably aware there was a bill this past year that was offered by the chairman of the retirement committee that would have taken one of those two COLAs away, which would have been a reduction in benefits. So I think, as Dr. Evans stated correctly, there are individual members out there who believe that TRS is in some jeopardy, or they think privatization or a more 401k type plan is best. But it's why we need to stay vigilant, and why I'm so grateful for GAE Retired and their constant presence at the retirement committee meetings.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions that I can see in my chat box, Lisa. So I'm going to go ahead and address both of them that a couple of them that I'll tell. One is a question about sick leave, and that was actually in the bill that Joe referred to. It would have done away with sick leave for new people coming in. Again, that bill did not pass. We believe that whatever plan, typically speaking, whatever plan exists for existing members upon day of employment ought to follow them throughout their career until retirement. That's what we believe ought to take place. The current law says that a member who is retiring, as long as they have 60 days of forfeited or unused sick leave, can use those days for retirement purposes. Now, we've got a scale, and can't quote you the scale off the top of my head, but roughly, if you've got a couple of 100 days, you can almost get like a year's time that can go to it. So if you again, that information is on our website, and our counselors can help you with that. I think it is very important. You're not capped. Somebody says that they capped at 120. That is not the case. You are not capped at the number of days. Now, I will tell you this, though. I have seen people that really have heartbreaking situations. I've even, been fussed at by a few people who found that they had 55, 56 days, and they said, I can't count any of them. And then the law says you got to have 60. We don't write the law, we administer it as the plan. So I do want to encourage all of your members, Lisa, to know where they're at, particularly, sit down with one of our retirement counselors within the last 2 years. Know where you're at in terms of the number of days. And if you got sick leave and you need to be sick, especially in these crazy times, you need to take your sick leave. But if you don't have to use that sick leave, and if you can perhaps find a way not to burn sick leave, especially if you're closing in on those 60 days, you want to protect those sick leave. So hopefully that answers your question about sick leave utilization. Next thing that comes up, someone asked a question, the difference between defined contribution and defined benefit plans. And that's a fantastic question, and gives me an opportunity to delve into two different major types of retirement plans that we have in this country. TRS is a defined benefit plan. It says if you work a number of years, you're for, let's say 30 years is the max plan, you work 30 years, you're going to get 2% of what your highest average salary was over a 24-month period of time. And that's going to be, in rough language, that's going to be your benefit, or 60% if you choose the max plan of what your highest time was. Now, that is what most defined benefit plans look like. Now, a defined contribution plan is typically what we see more common today in corporate America. We've seen some government agencies go there, but that type of plan is a plan where, let's say, you as an employee might put 6% of your income into a 403B or a 457 or a 401k. Your employer might then put 3%, 5%, might put 10%, there's various numbers, And they've chosen to do that in many situations so that they don't have a long-term liability to pay out a retirement plan over a long period of time. That is, a lot of people refer to that as a much more modern type of retirement plan. It certainly is more common in corporate America today. What we have seen in states that have gone to some form of pension reform, and that's actually what the state of Georgia now has for the ERS system, something we call a hybrid plan, where you may have that 403B and 457 for part, but then you all have a reduced benefit for the defined benefit plan. And what that looks like today in Georgia is, instead of having a 2% multiplier, you would just get a 1% multiplier. But the good news about that on the other side is, for the defined contribution part, that many people who participate and contribute a good portion of their salary, they can have a very large amount of money that they can do anything that they want to with when they retire. But that's sort of the difference of being defined contribution. Defined benefit is what we have, and then something that's sort of middle of the road, a defined benefit plan.
Okay, and one of the questions that's in my box, I think we're both getting different questions, asked, what would changing to a defined contribution plan for new hires do to our system's bottom line?
Yeah. Well, I don't know that I fully know the answer. I can tell you what happened with the state's ERS system, and I can tell you what has happened in some other states. Your retirement benefit that you're under and that you've earned and you're earning, the state is obligated by law, and I would like to even say ethically, to honor that obligation. You've given a commitment, you've fulfilled your commitment and your contractual obligations. The state has a legal obligation to pay that out. We've seen some states go away from that, but if they did not sufficiently put money in to, quote, make whole the system, because remember, when they do away with the plan, that means they don't have the employee contributions coming in at the same amount. It could actually drive up the cost of the plan and could undermine the plan. I think what we've seen happen in other states that went away from the defined benefit plan and went to a defined contribution plan, we've seen that happen. And it also has cost them more money. Just to be very honest with you, it's cost them more money to go that way. Their intent, this is what we call unintended consequences of legislation. And that's why it's so important for all of us to be involved in the legislative process, because if with every piece of legislation, there's always something called unintended consequences. And one of the unintended consequences for a plan like this is the fact that, they think it's going to save money, but in the long run, it actually costs them more money to serve the debt of what's called that. Now, we don't want to get into actuarial terms so much, but that unfunded accrued liability that is inherent to the long-term obligation of the defined benefit plan. So hopefully that answers the question.
Okay. And this next question, we know that all of the employees of the school system are not in TRS. Some of them are in PSERS. So what should an employee do if they were in a position that was not TRS eligible, and they've got a new position or promotion, and they're now in a position that is TRS eligible, but the district did not make that switch for them?
Ooh, well, I will say from our position, we want everyone who is TRS eligible to be a member of our system. The law is very clear about who should be members. I would probably say for this individual, I don't know who asked the question, I would certainly think they ought to begin that conversation with their own system's human resources department, and with very gently saying, we believe that this is a TRS eligible position, Certainly, if there are other people in that class, there has been litigation in Georgia among certain classes of people who believed that they were TRS eligible. We've worked with some systems to get somebody TRS eligible. You know, we don't typically go in and tell a system, hey, you've got to do this, but we would certainly counsel them that if they have people who should be TRS eligible in accordance with the law, that is how they ought to administer the plan. And then it's up to them to do it. And then if they don't do it, well, I would certainly say that person ought to be open to a conversation with their system. Most folks that we talk to, let me be very honest about this, most people that we talk to are very quick to do the right thing. That's just my experience. You know, I'm sure there may be some, quote, bad actors out there, but that's not generally my experience.
Okay. I've got a couple more questions. Will teachers get credit for the time schools were closed for the pandemic and we were working from home?
Well, we've had that question before, and I'm going to do my best attempt to answer that. And I think the answer to that question is yes. But here is the key. Were you being paid? And in being paid, were contributions being made to TRS for the employer contribution and the employee contribution? If that is the case, I can almost with a great 100% degree of confidence say, yes, you would have been being paid. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that to get a full year of credit for a teacher, you don't have to work all 12 months in a year. And again, you're kind of catching me off, you know, with Buster speaking from the hip now, but I believe it's after 9 months of that service, you get full credit. In other words, you can't get more than 1 year. So if you had been getting, you know, July check, August, September, October, November, December, January, February, and March, you got it for the year. Even if you did stop being paid, you would have still got your year's worth of credit for that year. I hope that makes sense, but that is something to be aware of. You get credit. You don't have to work all 12 months of a fiscal year to get a year's worth of service.
Okay. So this wasn't my question, but I was teaching in DeKalb County. I was teaching from home. I was getting paid. My paycheck didn't change, so they were still taking my TRS out. So the fact that we were at home should not impact that. Our work location switching.
Lisa, I absolutely, unless there's something that I don't get, but the bottom line is it goes down to the fact if there's a contribution being paid on your behalf, you're getting credit. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that.
Okay. The next question, and I think this is someone who is getting close to considering retirement. How long, once you retire, do you receive TRS?
Well, I believe the answer is that until you pass away, until you're no longer on this earth. Now, in some cases, if you have selected a plan other than our plan A, which is our maximum plan, your benefit may live beyond you. You may have selected a plan where you want to leave maybe a few $100s, or you may want to leave almost the whole amount to your individual. I certainly know people who have lived past the age of 100 who are continuing, and we've got, I think the last count that we had, we've got over, I love this statistic, we've got about 70 of our beneficiaries who are over the age of 100. Now, would you like to guess how many of them are men? Well, the answer to that question is 1. And my new goal in life is I want to be that next guy. But anyway, but bottom line is, you know, once you retire, you're going to draw that benefit for the rest of your life. And again, if you selected a plan other than our maximum plan, you can be leaving a benefit to your spouse, to your friend, You can leave it to your neighbor if you want to, or you leave it to your children or your grandchildren, but just understand there are actuarial implications for making a decision like that. But when you sit down with our counselor and you want to compare what those different plans may look like, they can tell you exactly what it would be like for you to be able to retire and leave Joe Fleming $100 a month for the rest of his life.
Okay, and I don't have any more questions in my box. Does anyone else have a question? Please, you can put it in the chat. One
Lisa,
thing I would like,
give it just a moment or two for a couple of more things that we've watched during the pandemic, just for people's information. One of the concerns that we've addressed almost from day one is the fear that we would see large numbers of people choosing to retire. And I've been on national level webinars and conferences and conversations and talked to from people from, New York and California and all these different places. At the end of June, we actually had nearly 10% fewer retirees over the previous year than we did from the previous year. So at year end, we had fewer. Now, and I think there are a couple of reasons for that. First of all, I think people were scared. I think some people didn't know what to do. I think some people were also thinking, to be honest, hey, if I can stay home and work from home for a period of time, I may just kind of hang in and see if I can make it all year. And I think some people too were experiencing, in many cases, educators are primary breadwinners. They carry the benefits and things like that. And maybe they had a spouse that may have lost a job. And they said, I can't make that decision now. But I think after things begin to settle down, and then I think also some people found out in maybe August and September that I'm going to have to work virtually, or I'm going to maybe have to do both. The reality of it is we have seen an uptick in our retirement applications each month since August, September, October, and November. Now, it's not huge, but it has been a slight increase. I'm one of these people that believes that these things sort of work themselves out over time. And I believe that's what we will see. I believe that we will see the reduction of retirees last year will most likely even itself out. Now, I'm going to tell you one other metric that we've been following. And I'll tell you why I started following this metric. I began to hear stories about friends of ours who passed away due to COVID-19. And I know that you're like I am. You've known some of your friends who might have been educators or family members or stuff like that. So I asked our people to begin to track death rates month over month. Every month since April, we have seen an increase in year-over-year deaths. And so while we've seen increases in retirees over the last 4 or 5 months, we have also seen increases in death rates. And that's just a reality that retired educators are also older. And we fall into that category of being higher at risk because we're older. And again, I just lost within the last month one of my some years ago, one of my dearest friends, who was a guy who I worked side by side with, and the diagnosis for his cause of death was COVID-19. So I think that's just a reality that until we get death rates under control, we're probably going to see two things that are going to remain at the increased level. People are choosing to retire, and also the death rates of our beneficiaries.
This next question, I'm not sure TRS will have a position, but I'm going to ask you the question because I think some of our members need to know about these issues. Does TRS have a position on the government pension offset and the windfall elimination provision?
Yeah. We are very familiar with that issue. And I won't go into great, and the bottom line is we do not have a position that is established by federal statute and law. We do think again, that ought to be a part of that conversation for someone who's doing retirement planning. If you retire from a system that did not have Social Security, and there are a number of those types of things, you could be subject to this government pension offset. And, you know, there are ways, there used to be a very easy way to get around that, and that would be to go to work for another employer just for one paycheck, and then you would retire. And actually, the law's been changed. You actually have to work for about 5 years. We don't have a position. We think it's unfortunate that it impacts some of our members, but that was a decision that some employers made in many cases 20, 30 years ago to be excluded from under Social Security. And we hardly ever see any of those employers choose to go back into Social Security, because I can tell you what the cost used to kind of look like. And for districts that I was in, it would probably been 6 to 8 millage rate percentage point increases. And it was just very, very costly to do so. But that is a disparity, and it's something that we're aware of. And it's unfortunate, but that's a part of life.
And from GAE's perspective, you know, that is something that, because we are members of the National Education Association, we have national, that is on the national agenda to lobby for Congress and to get those repealed. And so it is certainly on the NEA legislative agenda and a high priority for them.
Couple of other questions that I've seen pop up by one of my good friends. I won't call his name, but he asked a question: is it true you cannot change your beneficiary after retirement? Well, that might be true. Under a number of circumstances, that is in fact the case. And the reason why that is, your retirement benefit is going to be calculated based on the actuarial impact of who your beneficiary is. So, you know, it's not like you can. Now, in some particular cases, based on what option did you choose, in the case of death and our other situations, you may be able to. But that is all the more reason why you do 2 things. One, you know who your beneficiary is right now, whoever your beneficiary is. Number 1. And then 2, ensure that when you do retire, that you've got that, and we will go over that with you, but to know that you've got that updated beneficiary. Now, I will tell you that another situation that people can do, sometimes a person, and not to overly complicate things, a person may be able to freeze their retirement, go back to work, select another plan, and do some other things. But in general, I think you need to go into this thing thinking you got to think very carefully about who your beneficiary is, because under most circumstances, you will not be able to change that beneficiary once you do retire. Somebody also asked the question, what happens if the district doesn't pay their part? Well, honestly, we don't have that problem. There is a provision in state law. We've had some districts and our employers that were late. We've had some that ran into financial trouble. We've always worked to them. But the bottom line is there is a provision for their state funding to be withheld if they don't pay their employer contribution rates. And they want to get their state funding. So they'll pay them.
I didn't see that question. I wonder if that was someone in DeKalb, because I know there's been some confusion over the years. DeKalb had a TSA that they stopped paying, and people were confused and thought they had stopped paying TRS.
Yeah, that's another issue, and I am familiar with that as well. And that is not a TRS issue. So we understand that. Is interesting to follow, and certainly one of those things that a lot of litigation has been discussed about that. So we'll let that be between the employer and their members, and not
right.
TRS.
It's just something that people got confused because TRS and TSA are so close in the initials. But no, all our districts, I think, are paying their TRS. Any other questions this evening? Joe?
Yeah, Buster, I just have one. We saw a bill this year that would allow retired teachers to return to the classroom full time. Can you explain how that bill would have worked and whether TRS had any objections to it?
Yeah, Joe, thank you for that question. Actually, we liked that legislation, and I'll tell you why. I thought it was actually good for the education profession. First of all, from a policy perspective, let me address real quickly why that is. If you have this bill would allow special needs areas, critical shortage areas, whether or not it was special education, math, science, foreign language, engineering, or maybe even if you happen to be in Clay County, Georgia, and you couldn't find an early childhood teacher, and you want a teacher. I mean, obviously, the number one biggest difference in any child's education is the quality of that classroom teacher. As an administrator, I want to be able to promise to you that I'm giving your kid the best teacher that they can get. We like that because it allowed you as administrators to be able to do that. We liked it also because even though that person was retired, and we had this back up until 2012, the district would continue to pay the employer portion and the employee portion that goes to TRS. That is important because that is a position that otherwise would have been filled by a TRS member. So it's important to keep the system whole for those contributions to be coming in. So a person could have come in and they could have had that agreement with their district to do that. I thought it was a win for the district because they could get a good teacher. It was a win for retirees who wanted to come back to work on a year-to-year basis. There was nothing guaranteed long-term. And but I think it's also even a bigger win than that from our standpoint, because we have our 40 people who come back to work 49% or less. We don't get any contribution on them. And oftentimes, sometimes people may hire 2 retirees to fill one position that would otherwise be hired by a single TRS contributing member. Now, I did that as a school system administrator. I'll confess to it. But now looking at my TRS hat on, it's probably not good business sense from an overall health of the organization. And my goal right now to you is to do everything that I can do to ensure the long-term sustainability of the teachers' retirement system of Georgia. But for that reason, Joe, that's the reason why that actually would have been a pretty good piece of legislation. I think you may see that come back. Shaw Blackman was the state representative who carried that bill. I think it was moving on a pretty good track. I think the reason probably COVID-19 was its worst enemy. Once the legislature came back in June, they had a certain number of things that they felt like was critically important for them to get passed. And I just don't think that fit in the critical needs area at this point in time. But again, it's an important one to watch.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. And I had 2 more questions just popped up right after that one. In the case of a TRS member working 49%, can they pay into TRS outside of payroll deduction? So can they make their contribution themselves?
Well, there's not a provision for that. It's awfully noble for someone to maybe think about doing that. And it's probably when you ask about what's the right thing to do, I would say, that's awfully nice of you, but you just work 49% or less. That's the way the system is drawn right now. And I hate to say don't worry about it, but it just does not have that provision in state law right now.
Okay. And this question, I think I know the answer, and this is something I think a lot of us need to hear. I started teaching at the beginning of a school year, but my retirement date is November 30th. Basically they're saying they've lost 2 months. Might that be due to being a female having a maternity leave, or any of us having a medical leave for a reason? Are we accruing retirement if we're on those leaves?
I want to go back to this and say that the key is, were you getting a check, and were those employer and employee contributions being made on your behalf? Now, Lisa, in most cases, I think that probably would not be getting credit for that period of time. it may just depend on what kind of leave was being used. Obviously, if it was sick leave that was being used up and they're getting that check, those things would be coming in. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I know someone who had that, couldn't figure it out. And then once she went back and looked what she didn't get credit for, it was that time, because when we have children, we tend to be younger and we don't have a whole lot of sick leave accrued. So that's that one. That's all the questions that are in my box. If you don't have any more questions, I again want to thank you for being with us this evening and for all the great information. And thank our members for participating this evening. Joe and I will be at the Capitol every day. We know our retired members will be down there. And should that retirement bill come up, we want to be ready, and we want to take the great advice we've been given today and first thank them for our great system, and then explain why it is so important that we keep it great. So thank you all for being here, and we will see you again. Our next session for Rights at Night will be December 8th. And that evening, we will be talking about the GAE lawsuit about the school reopenings. So thank you, everyone.
Good night.